I am trying to learn game development, and as such, I've been working on some small projects here and there. I'm probably going to post the first project I ever did soon, but anyway, I've been working on I'm still kind of a beginner, I'd say, and I've been working on this project that's probably a little bit out of my scope for a while now, and I want to just step back and take a break from that. So what I'm going to do with this video is, recently on Game Makers Toolkit, the guy who runs that channel is learning game development and learning Unity, and right now he's going through the steps of recreating games to take the things he learned from tutorials and videos and try to implement them himself. So he took Flappy Bird and he recreated Flappy Bird, and that's when I realized I kinda skipped that step. I've made a couple things. That's all based on tutorial videos and stuff. I've never looked at an original game and then tried to remake it. So what I decided to do is take a break from my current project and test myself in Unity to see if I could actually recreate Flappy Bird myself. I decided to do Flappy Bird because that seemed like it'd be pretty fun to do. So what I did is I gave myself a 5-hour challenge. So I had 5 hours to try to recreate Flappy Bird as much as I could. Of course, I wasn't going to create some polished version. It was just going to be a sort of more prototype version, but I had 5 hours from a blank Unity canvas to whatever I had done at the end. So I want to start it out talking about the things that I think I'll be strong at with this, and then the things I might have problems with. So the things I think I'll be alright on are, I think controlling the bird itself won't be much of a problem. I'm familiar with rigid bodies and colliders and all that stuff, so I think that won't be too difficult. I think the score won't be too difficult. And then running into the pillars and all that won't be too difficult. I'm not sure how spawning is going to go. I haven't really done much of that. So when it comes to spawning the pillars for the bird to avoid, I'm not sure if that's going to be easy or not. So that's something I have to look out for. And then the other things I'm not sure if it'll be easy or not are, once the bird hits an object and then it's game over, restarting everything back to the initial point without having to leave and re-enter the game. I'm not sure exactly how to do that well either. So I think that might be a point of issue. I mean, of course the art's going to be bad. I'm not very good at art. But otherwise, I don't know if 5 hours is too much or too little, but I think this is going to be a good time. So this video is just going to be me doing the video, narrating over some video about what I was doing at the time, and then at the end I'm going to go over what I actually did have problems with and thoughts about it and things I could have done better. So here we go. So here we are, starting out with a blank Unity canvas. What I decided to work on first was the bird. I just decided to, just make him a circle. I don't want to worry about the art right now. And I'm using a rigid body so that he interacts with Unity physics so that he could have gravity. So from there, what I was going to do is just give him a velocity boost upwards every time you press the spacebar as his jump. But what ended up not working was the way boost worked was it interacted with gravity, so if he was going down quickly, he didn't go up as much, and if he was going up a lot, he went up even further. And if you watch the Flappy Bird gameplay, he always goes up the same amount regardless of his downward speed. So in order to fix that, what I did was every time you press the spacebar, it completely reset his Y velocity to 0, and then it boosted him back up, and then gravity starts to act on him at that point. From there, I tried to remake the Flappy Bird. I didn't want to use any of the original Flappy Bird assets. And as you can see, I am not very good at art. All this is at 10 times speed, and I'm just trying to do a little first try, a little outline. It was not going well, so I decided to switch over to working on the obstacle. And at first for the obstacle I made it a single unit with space in between, but I realized that wasn't going to work very well when it came to adding colliders to it, and then adding a score trigger in the middle. So what I ended up doing was making the obstacle one unit, and having the parent object have two obstacle children, which are just obstacles on each side of each other, and from there I could just scale it up and down to however high I wanted the gap to be, and then I could put the score trigger in the middle so that when I moved the obstacle parent wherever I wanted, it would have all of that within it as well. And then from there, I was trying to work out how to destroy the obstacle and how to make it move. Turns out destroy has a built-in function where it gets destroyed after a certain amount of time, so I used that in order to destroy it. If I were to go back, I would have made it have a trigger at the edge of the level, past the camera, to where once the obstacle hit it, it got destroyed, because there ended up being a problem at the end of the game where if you run into it and hit the game over state, the obstacles will just sit there and then end up disappearing, which obviously doesn't work. So from there, I of course made the obstacles move, and I tried to make a spawning object which would take the prefab of the obstacle game object, and it would spawn one of those at an interval, which just for making the game work at first was just going to be 1 second, and I ended up sticking at 1 second because the way the obstacles moved at their speed, 1 second ended up working really well. And that's where I ran into probably the biggest problem of this entire experience, was something about the way I was trying to instantiate a game object or an obstacle object into the game caused Unity to completely poop its pants. The instantiate line just didn't work at all, and I couldn't figure out if that was the reason why for a little bit. But Unity crapped itself. It wouldn't even open for the most part, and once it finally did open, it would open to a completely new and blank scene. It would open, the old one would still be in there, but it of course still didn't work. And so what finally fixed it, I believe, was just fixing the instantiate problem. The way I had set it up, I'm not sure what about it broke Unity, especially to that degree. I've never had that happen before, but I eventually got it so that it would just clone a copy of the obstacle prefab and then spawn that, and then of course the obstacle would do its own thing from there. But for a little bit I kept trying to make workarounds that made it, spawn at a regular interval, and it just didn't work. And eventually I did get the spawning working, but as you can see, it constantly spawns things every single second. And I found this function called Invoke Repeating, which I was trying to create a coroutine that spawns something every second. But Invoke Routine can call the spawn function, and it will keep working at a regular interval to whatever I set it as. And this became a problem for a good amount of time as well. And the problem I ended up figuring out with it was an update the whole time. The spawn obstacle, or the Invoke Repeating, was an update. An update gets called every frame. So every frame I was calling a new Invoke Repeating, which was calling the spawn object, which therefore spawned a new obstacle every frame, which obviously is not what I want. So I finally figured it out by putting Invoke Repeating in the start. So once the game starts, it starts the Invoke Repeating and spawns an object or an obstacle every second. So great, that's working. From there, I decided to make the score, because the entire point of Flappy Bird is so that you can go over to your friend and sort of like slap him on the shoulder and be like, hey, good try, but I got a better score than you. it's just a little showing off. So I just got a couple of score methods from another project I worked on. I didn't feel like Googling all that because I knew exactly where it was within my other project. So I just hopped in there, took a couple methods, and then massaged them into my game as in locations where they would fit. And I of course had to make a game session object in order to hold the score. And then the score trigger would call the add to score function from the game session. So great. That was all working splendidly. And I was pretty good to go. That's of course like a prototype. From there, I still had some stuff to work on, like restarting the game. So my first problem was when the bird runs into an obstacle, obstacles keep moving and they keep spawning. So I created two states in the game, which was the bird is, still playing the game, and then the bird is snoozing. I decided to make it a little G-rated. So what I wanted to set it as was once the bird hit an obstacle, the obstacles stopped spawning and the obstacles stopped moving. And this is where the destroy after a certain amount of time problem comes in, because if you hit an obstacle and just sit there, after the amount of time I set them to destroy after, everything will just start disappearing. So that's obviously not good. So when it came to once you hit an obstacle you just fall, I didn't want the bird to just fall into the ether for sleeping, so I just of course made a ground object, gave it a collider, and the bird is already calculating that if it runs into an obstacle, it does all this stuff. All the obstacle collision detection is within the bird controller, so I didn't have to worry about creating a whole bunch of new scripts for the ground object. That wasn't a problem. And all the movement and spawning took me a little bit to figure out, but I of course eventually got it. If I were to change anything now that I'm going back to it on how this was constructed, I would have controlled a lot more just from the game session, because I had to give obstacles a game state, I had to give game session a game state, I had to give the bird a game state, I think I had to give the spawner a game state, and that's obviously not very efficient and well done. So where if I run into one problem with one script, like everything's gonna be messed up and I have to change everything around. So if I were to go back and do it, I definitely would have changed that. It was very inefficient and would have caused a lot of problems down the road. I solved it in a very inefficient way where I couldn't call the game state from a different script, so in order to fix that, I just checked the state of if the bird was flapping from a true or false statement I made, and I checked that every single frame within the obstacle and game session, which is extremely inefficient, but under the time constraint, the only thing I could figure out how to do at that time, so I of course did it, and everything is very inefficient because of that, but for now it works. And then from there, I had to cut a bunch of stuff because it showed a bunch of personal information, but I went and grabbed the background, something that, had the pixel art style and looked nice, and it also had a ground already on it, so I could line its ground up with the ground I created, so that the ground looks nice, but it also has a collider to it. So from there, I wanted to create the restart the game function, which surprisingly was a big problem. Well, not surprisingly, I knew that going in, but this is where all the game states really came into play. And then I had a lot of problems when it came to destroying and respawning all the objects. You already, the story of completely destroying Unity while trying to spawn an object taught me a couple lessons when it came to instantiating. But I still had a couple when it came to destroying, because I didn't want to destroy every single object. When the bird is snoozing on the ground and the obstacles are stopped, I had to destroy every single spawned obstacle. I had to destroy the bird, and for whatever reason I destroyed the spawner as well. And then I had to respawn all those in the appropriate positions, which is just respawn the bird and respawn the spawner, and then of course also change all the associated game states to the proper game state, which is where all of those, having a game state in pretty much every single script, became a problem, and probably would have been a lot easier if I just had most of the game states in only one script. It would have been so much easier to deal with, and for something as simple as this, I probably could have structured it that way, but it's okay. I was still having problems with destroying. This and the initial spawning problem were probably the ones that gave me the most trouble. And you can see right there the game state problems coming right into play. That was not a good look. But of course, here I still am, still trying to figure out how to destroy all the obstacles. Because how I had it before was it would find an obstacle but only destroy one at a time, and I kept having to research how to destroy all the obstacles. It was especially hard because since they don't inherently exist within the scene at the start, I couldn't just call the obstacle and be like, or I couldn't simply reference the game obstacle object that simply, since it was never in there to begin with until later. So that, of course, that was a problem. And then I got the score working as well eventually, and now everything restarts properly as it should. I got some error, never saw that error again, so I'm just gonna keep rolling. And then from here, the last 2 hours, I forgot to record because I took a break, and then I came back, and I guess I just didn't hit record or whatever, but I stopped recording. But what I'm gonna do is play the footage of the final thing, of the final game, and after I play the footage, I'm just gonna talk about some of the last decisions I made, and then of course go into the outro of my general experience with this. So to go over my general experience with this, I had a good time. It was fun to take a break from another project and just do a really quick small challenge. I think introducing the timed element made it a little more fun as well, because I put a little bit of extra pressure. I couldn't slack off as much. So now I'm going to talk about, throughout the video I already talked about problems I had, so I'm not going to go over those again. So right now I'm going to talk about some of the last decisions and changes I made to the, air quotes, final version that I forgot to record. So first off, obviously I changed the background. Once I made the bird sprite, I noticed that the sprite and the obstacles were a little hard to see against the background I already had. So I went and found a brighter background that didn't have as much going on in the back, and it sort of gives it a better look, like it's a bird flying through the air rather than some random temple sitting there. So I think the sort of horizon lookout looks way better, so does the colors. I obviously made my own bird sprite. He does not look very good. I'm honestly a fan of him. I based him off this bird in Australia. My girlfriend and I watched this show, and it just, for a second, they just showed a bird sitting in a tree, and I thought the bird was really pretty, so I based this off of that bird. So I did all that art in Sprite, and for its wings, I gave its wings a little bit of pixel dithering, so that when you see the flaps, it's pretty easy to tell when he's actually flapping. And of course, the wings being at the bottom or the top also tell that a little as well. I included some sounds too. It just made it feel a lot better. I like the jump sound I got. I mean, I couldn't find any, quick whooshing sounds for flapping, so I just got this really basic jump sound. If I had more time, I would have gotten something better or made something better, but this does for now. I got a point sound effect, and I really wish I went back and turned this down because it's kind of loud. I really would like to turn that down. I also have a game over sound effect. It's a very standard retro sound effect. The music I chose, I was just looking for, free royalty-free music and all that. I found this song. It does not fit the tone of a Flappy Bird style game at all. It has an element of, melancholic thoughtfulness to it. I was looking for something just with a general sort of bright ambience, but I found this, and I just thought it was good. Since this isn't a serious project, I thought it was a good song. I just decided to use that anyway, and I, just looped that. Other than that, of course, the bird has flapping animations, which look a lot better than the old bird. I actually made it a little bit easier, which I think if I were to go back, I'd probably tune it back down to being a little bit harder again. But for right now, it's actually really easy. I opened the space up between the two obstacles a little bit, and I also shortened the hop of the bird just a little bit. Both those changes were very minuscule, but they had a very large impact on how easy the game was, so I'd probably at least revert one of those. And then I also included a high score, so of course, let's say you get to a score of 10. When you restart the game, your score goes back to 0, but your high score stays at 10. Obviously, that's how high scores work. I just felt that was, so the player can track what their high score is at their current playing session. There's no saving or anything in it right now, but that's how it is. And I'm generally pleased. For 5 hours, I was fairly impressed with myself. It was a bit of a challenge. I had to do things I hadn't done in a while, and I of course learned things as well, which was the entire reason of doing this challenge. 1 was to test myself, and 2 was to learn things from the things I had problems with, and that's exactly what happened here. So I hope you enjoyed the adventure, and you have a good day. Take care of yourself.